It is now time to introduce our keynote speaker. It is actually my great honor to introduce a hero among us, the Honorable Joe R. Straus, as our keynote speaker. Speaker Straus has ensured that for many years the core values that this extraordinary city of San Antonio and the entire state of Texas, founded in diversity and adversity and powerful as a testimony to confluence, tolerance, and enlightenment. We are so proud of the work Speaker Straus has accomplished on our behalf. Speaker Straus stands on illustrious and generational history, a history we know he is proud of and about which he will share today. I want to share a teeny bit of this history. Joe R. Straus III is a fifth-generation San Antonian. Straus made his first run for public office in 2005 when he was elected to represent northeastern Bexar County in the Texas House. 4 years later, his House colleagues elected him to serve as Speaker. He has since been re-elected Speaker 4 times. For those of us who know him, we're not surprised, but it wasn't easy. Straus has prioritized issues that support private sector growth, such as education, workforce development, and infrastructure. He has also been praised for his inclusive, solutions-oriented approach to the state's challenges. He was recently named the 2017 Dallas Morning News Texan of the Year, and most recently honored in this very room, the World Affairs Council honored for the Citizen of the Year. Both Speaker Straus and his wife Julie have been long involved with the Witte Museum, as have his parents, Joe and Jossie Straus, here with us today, and generations before them. We are so pleased that the Strauses chose the Witte Museum's 2 paintings for the Speaker's offices, Kinsabi Ranch by Schloss and A Young Girl by Julian Onderdonk, and they look really great, especially that Kinsabi over your black couch. Pretty awesome, right? They look fabulous. What better speaker as keynote of San Antonio's Tricentennial than the Honorable Joe Straus? Please help me welcome him to the stage.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you all very much for the kind introduction. If I had known that people would be so nice to me after I announced that I wasn't running for re-election, I would have quit a long time ago. I just want to start by assuring you, Maurice and Peggy and others who were involved at the time, that I do intend to return those paintings. You loaned me those paintings thinking it might be 2 years. It's now going on 10 years. Little did I know at the time back in 2009 when I was suddenly elected Speaker with about 10 days to go before the beginning of that session of the legislature, that along with building a large staff from scratch and just being prepared to preside over 150 members in what was then a very closely divided House of Representatives, that along with that came the responsibility of completely redecorating the Speaker's office and the entire Speaker's apartment. So Julie and my sister Lynn and Maida and Boo Hauser and Peggy and Maurice and others at the Witte sprung into action and got the job done. And you mentioned the Kinsabi Ranch. Every single day, it is a very large, beautiful painting that covers most of the wall straight across from the desk in the Speaker's office. So I look at it every single morning, and it only occurred to me recently that, of course, Kinsabi means who knows. Well, that's exactly the question that you could have asked me every morning over the last 10 years. I also really didn't know much about the history of the Kinsabi Ranch, so I looked at the Handbook of Texas History, and it just, as a coincidence, that ranch was a very, very large ranch covering most of the Permian Basin in West Texas. It was owned by a distant relative of my family named Meyer Half. Today, there's a Kinsabi Ranch that's owned by the Seelixons that was also a Meyer Half founded ranch. So I think about the Witte every single day, and I thank you for 10 years of allowing me to enjoy it. Now, Maurice, I imagine 2 years stretching into 10 has made you one of those many people who worry quite a bit about whether government's going to seize their property and not give it back, but I assure you I will. Anyway, Julie and I want to thank you all for being here to celebrate the rich history of San Antonio and for all of us to look forward to what will be a very vibrant future for our community. And I want to, again, thank everyone associated with the Witte Museum for the time and the talent that you put into planning this conference, as well as the Witte's outstanding Tricentennial exhibits. This museum is a place where families have come to learn and grow together, and I'm very happy that the members of my family could be here today. My mom and dad, and of course, Julie. And I'm looking around so many people who I know in this room. It's no secret to you when I tell you that I am extremely fortunate to have all three of them in my life. I also want to thank Mary Margaret McAllen, who first extended the invitation for us to be with you today. Or in other words, for those of you who thought and who hoped that you wouldn't have to listen to a politician at all during this weekend, you have Mary Margaret to blame. But Mary Margaret's tireless research and her gift for writing and her love for this region have given many of us a fuller and more vivid understanding of the people and the events that have shaped our state. She is, in every sense of the word, a San Antonio treasure. And to us, Julie and I, of course, she's also a treasured friend and our next-door neighbor. Although Mary Margaret, having written books with names like I Would Rather Sleep in Texas and A Brave Boy and a Good Soldier, well, I think she might have missed her real calling as a country and western songwriter. But I'm really grateful that she's invited us to be here today, and I know the last couple of days have been very enlightening and enriching, and there's no shortage of material. As San Antonio's own Ted Fehrenbach wrote in his book Lone Star, the great difference between Texas and every other American state in the 20th century was that Texas had a history, and that's especially true for San Antonio. Over the last couple of days, you've heard from some very bright minds and from some deep thinkers. Now, as you know, I'm from the Texas legislature. So for me, being around bright minds and deep thinkers is quite a departure. But actually, when I was quite a bit younger, I was among those teenage boys called the Super Scoopers, who would, some of you might have remembered that. We were the kids who walked behind the horses in the fiesta parades, cleaning up after them. So you can say that at least one San Antonio tradition prepared me quite well for the years that I've served in public office. But on a more serious note, many of the topics that you've discussed from a historical perspective at this conference are the very same issues that we face in the legislature. How people get the water that they need to live. How do you develop a dynamic economy? And how do people from different cultural and racial backgrounds live and grow together? And that's not even mentioning the rather spirited debate that we're seeing these days over the Alamo complex. In fact, the Alamo discussion highlights something that I think is very positive about San Antonio and important to reflect on as we celebrate this, our Tricentennial year. This community is one that really cares about its history. And because of all that we do to preserve and honor the past, the signal's been sent that this is a place of global importance. That's why our 5 Spanish colonial missions have been designated a World Heritage Site. And it's why the National Park Service recently added downtown San Antonio to the National Register of Historic Places, which will make some of our most recognizable buildings and places eligible for state and federal tax credits in the future. But I think there's something else to remember when we talk about the history in San Antonio. This community is always evolving. Our past is part of our future. I need to look no further than my own family's story. Our role in the San Antonio economy dates back to the L. Frank Saddlery, a company that my great-grandfather's uncle founded around 1870 on Main Plaza. But as modes of transportation changed and the horse and the buggy gave way to the automobile, the family business evolved into an auto parts enterprise and later into other businesses as well. We've watched San Antonio change and develop through the years. The ranch where my father and my uncle David grew up is today the headquarters of USAA, a Fortune 500 company, and very soon will be a Fortune 100 company. And to highlight change on a smaller, but still important scale, the botanical gardens, where our youngest daughter Robin celebrated a birthday some 2 decades ago, recently opened a new nature space for children and for families. In fact, the evolving history of our community, the connection between past and present, can be found right here in the story of the Witte Museum. Born in the mind of a high school teacher named Ellen Schultz Quillen almost a century ago, made possible by a gift left behind by Alfred Witte a couple of years later, and transformed through the decades, especially under Maurice's brilliant leadership since 2004. In other words, San Antonio changes and it evolves every day. And it's not going to stop changing. And it's up to all of us to determine what the next chapter will be. It's predicted that the population of Bexar County is going to grow by another 1 million people by the year 2040. In fact, lately we've been growing faster here than Dallas or Houston. And just to our north in New Braunfels, it's now one of the fastest growing cities in the entire country. This growth will amplify many of the challenges that we've dealt with throughout our history. Mobility, poverty, inequities in our education system, and the availability of jobs. All of us will have a role in confronting and solving these challenges, and I hope that all of us will feel compelled to act in some way. But here's the good news. San Antonio has always demonstrated a capacity for and a commitment to kindness and charity. You see it in the sacrifices of our military families, in the countless faith groups that carry out good works, in your local schools and colleges where opportunity is born and promise is nurtured. We honor our rich history with this shared commitment to humanity and to service. But it's not just about volunteering or giving to good causes, as important as those things are. We can have just as much impact over the next 300 years by being active, engaged citizens. This is something that I've talked about quite a bit lately, and especially now that we are in another election year. Texas is not a place known for its civic participation, and this is something that really needs to change. In Texas, our primary elections and the runoffs that follow are critically important. For all intents and purposes, those primaries often determine who will hold federal, state, and local offices. But in the primary elections earlier this month, despite many hotly contested contests up and down the entire ballot, only about 15% of the eligible voters in Bexar County participated. Much of what ails our politics today is the fact that not enough of us show up or speak out. And as a result, a small group of people, often the most strident voices on the right and on the left, have greater influence than their numbers should allow. This is a Texas problem, to be sure, and not just a Bexar County problem. But all of us have a role in fixing it. By voting in the primaries and the general elections, and by the way, voting in the runoffs is permitted even if you didn't get to to the polling place in March. But we can fix it by voting. We can fix it by showing up to city council meetings and showing up to legislative hearings up in Austin. We can fix it by communicating with the people who we do finally elect to office. Those of you who know and appreciate our history, those of you in this room, are exactly the people we need to hear more from. You understand what it took to make this a great place to live. By any measure, the San Antonio economy is a success. It's diverse, and it's vibrant. And since I'm not obviously campaigning this year, I've had a chance to step back away from the bubble in Austin. I've been able to travel the country quite a bit and talk to a lot of business people. I know that people are looking to invest in our community. They've told me they are. They want to invest in this state, and they are very definitely watching to see how we address the challenges that come with our rapid growth. They're watching to see how we continue to evolve. And all of us can have a voice in what the priorities of this community are going to be. So much of the history of Texas is rooted here in San Antonio, and the same can be said about the future of Texas. San Antonio, in many ways, is the future of this changing state, because we know the tremendous value of diversity and multiculturalism among our people. Texas will continue to look more and more like San Antonio, and we know that Texas will be a better place because of it. And so while there are many challenges on the horizon, there are also plenty of reasons for optimism and for confidence. San Antonio will, of course, continue to grow. It will change, and it will evolve. And all of us will help determine the place that this becomes this year, next year, and really for the next 300 years. So as I begin to wrap up here today, I want to thank everyone who has put this conference together. I want to thank those of you who work throughout the year to make the Witte Museum such a great resource in our community. And I want to assure you again that I didn't run for re-election. So I am going to have to move out of the speaker's apartment, and I will get those paintings back to you. But mostly, I want to thank all of you for your interest in and your appreciation for the vast and fascinating history of this wonderful 300-year-old community. Thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.